Welcome. Today I'm going to talk about uh, the Beauty and the Beast story as a myth, and the Italian version is Belinda and the Monster. And that's Italo Calvino's wonderful, he did a wonderful collection of Italian folktales, which generally have a jauntier quality than grim. So, what is the monster? How do you save the monster? In Japanese culture, people are very concerned with ghosts, which is a common thing where, originally people used to put those big slabs on graves. It wasn't so nobody could rob the grave, it was so that people couldn't get up out of the grave and haunt you. It was a great concern of many peoples, many cultures. How do you let the dead rest? So, save a ghost was a big koan. How do you set the dead? This one, though, is save a monster. Who's your monster? How do you save her or him? Save a monster. Any question like that, any koan question, you just... I don't know what you do with it, really. But you can tell if you're with it, you can tell if you're avoiding it, you can tell if you're letting it overwhelm you. The monsters in your life overwhelm you, or if you're denying all the monsters, or you can tell all that stuff. So instead of that, just let it come to you. Be with them, be with that question, save a monster. Plenty of monsters abroad in the world. There always are. Yeah, we had a Thursday night through Sunday midday kind of retreat. And then also, we often do a legend. And so with this Belinda and the monster story, the story is that, in very short form, is a little different from Beauty and the Beast. And it is derived from Psyche and Eros, I guess, but I don't know that it helps much because it's just its own story, Belinda and the monster. And, there are three sisters, as is often the case in a tale. And the mother's not around, and the father is a wealthy merchant, and they're all kind of, two of the sisters in particular are very, pleased and get a lot of offers for marriage and things like that, but they turn them down because they want somebody better than the rich merchant themselves. But the youngest one, who's called Belinda, just says, well, I think I'm too young to consider such matters right now. We can talk about it later. And so everybody likes her, and her sisters are rather imperious and rejecting. Then one day the merchant loses his ship, goes down, or is reported to have gone down, and he has no money, and all he has left is a little cottage in the country, somewhere inland from Mendocino, I think. So, and he's far from the city and the port and everything. And so they go and live out there, and the sisters are very bitter about this, except for Belinda, who says, well, let's help out. And she helps her father, plant crops and dig the garden and so on, and clean the house, cook. And then the merchant hears that one of his ships has sort of limped into port, and so with half its cargo or something like that. And so he rushes in, but the daughters say they're going to have their old life again. And one wants a peach-coloured silk gown, the other one wants a gown the colour of air. And Belinda's about suspicious about this return of fortune, and she says, well, I don't know, it doesn't seem to be a time to be spending a lot of the little money we have, so just bring me a rose if you want to bring me something. So he goes to the port, and all the merchants in San Francisco and Oakland have already stolen all the cargo and claimed debts and tied him up with lawsuits. And so he comes home. and he doesn't have a horse anymore, so he's got to walk all that way. And so what he does is he's night comes on and he's cold and it starts to snow and he hears wolves around howling in the distance, and so and he's kind of frightened actually, and frightened of those wolves, and then he sees a light in the distance and goes towards it, and it's a lit up palace, and it's open and it's warm, and he walks in and warms himself and dries his clothes by the fire by turning his back and so on, and then he looks around the room, and it's this incredible palace, and there's this amazing feast just for one person on the table, and he calls out and tries to find the person, but in the end he's hungry, and he says, well, don't look gift horses in the mouth, and he sits down and eats it. And then he's sort of really exhausted, and he wanders on, and in the next room there's this beautiful bed made up just as if for him. And so he lies down and just sleeps sweetly till the morning. In the morning he gets up and there are new clothes, dry clothes, a new suit of clothes ready for him just in his size. So he gets dressed, feeling a lot better about life, and at least he can delay telling his daughters about the disaster, and he has a marvelous breakfast, and whatever your marvelous breakfast is, that's what he had. That's what he had. And so he has this marvelous breakfast, cornflakes or miso soup according to your taste, and and then he realizes he has to go home, and so he walks out, and it's not snowing anymore, and he sees this there's a huge rose bush in the center of the garden, and he sees a red rose, so he plucks it, thinking, I'll get this I can bring this home for Belinda. And because in his hurry he forgot to get her a rose, and as soon as he plucks the rose, there's this amazing frightening roar, and this monster appears that's like amazingly hideous and with tusks and really scary and huge and lumbering, and roars and says, how dare you, I fed you, I dried you, I gave you a bed, and now you're stealing my roses. And he said, I wanted to bring it from my youngest daughter, who, I have nothing for her, I have a gift for the others, and we're destitute and I have nothing for her. And so the beast calmed down a bit and said, well, if you can bring her and get her, if she's willing to come and live with me, I'll spare your life and everyone else will live in comfort. But if she's not, you will die. And he's sort of terrified. And so off you go, says the beast, and sends him on his way. And then he tries to turn back, but he can't find the palace, and tries to turn back and says, well, just kill me now, sort of thing. And he can't do that. So eventually he arrives home, and he gives the dresses to the two older sisters, who are kind of thrilled, but and then he gives the rose to Belinda, and she's rather kind of sad, she's a bit, you can tell he's really sad, and says, what's up? And so he tells her the whole story, and the sisters say, we thought so, Belinda and her fancy ideas, why didn't she just ask for a dress like the rest of us? And Belinda said, you're right, it's my fault, I brought all this on our family, so I shall go to the beast and nobody else, but Father will have to show me the way. And he says, well, you have to want to, the beast won't accept you if you don't come willingly or something. And she says, no, it's willingly, I'll save the whole family this way. So in the morning, with a heavy heart, they set off, and they trudge through the forest, but the path is quite clear going back. And they come to and the beast appears and says, and Belinda's she thought, well, how bad can he be? And then the beast appears, and she thinks, that's bad. Unspeakably hideous, more than I had, far worse than I had feared. And so, and he's got like tusks and a snout, and strange fur everywhere and things. And so he says, well, so this is Belinda, and did you come of your own free will? You do not have to do this. And she said, yes, I have come of my own free will. And he says, very well then, rather abruptly to the father, you can go home now, but fill a box with jewels and anything you want, there's a chest in there, fill it with jewels, and I'll arrange to have it at your place. And the father sort of feels terrible about this, but he follows instructions, fills the box, and then he sets off home. And then by the time he gets home, indeed, all the jewels are there, and the sisters are delighted. But Belinda, and then the beast disappears, and Belinda finds there's a bed, and she goes to sleep, and she has a wonderful meal, and she goes to sleep. And in the morning, there's no one around, and just this beautiful. But she finds on her room it says Belinda's room, and over the kitchen says Belinda's dining room, and Belinda's kitchen, and Belinda's wardrobe, and all these fine clothes and everything you could ever want in the way of stuff. And so but she's not that into stuff, and then when supper time comes, this beautiful meal appears, and the beast rolls up, and he just sits with her while they eat, and he says, and he's very kind and courteous, and has very grave, elegant manners, and he says, I don't suppose you'd want to marry me, would you? And she says, no, I think not. She doesn't know what to do, because she thinks, well, is he going to eat me or harm my family or something if I say no? But I certainly don't want to say yes. So she says, I just think not, And she has some practice in saying no to suitors. And so this goes on. And every night the beast comes to visit her and sits with her, and they eat. And then he says, would you marry me, Belinda? And she says, no, I can't do that. And he says, am I that ugly? And she says, ugly indeed you are, but you have a kind heart, and that goes some way to beginning to make you beautiful. And he's still very sad, and he goes off. And then he shows her the magical features. There's a tree that the leaves turn up when people are happy at Belinda's home, and they turn down when people are sad, and the leaves are turned up. And so she says, what's up at home? And he says, oh, your sister's getting married. And he says, oh, can I go back? And he says, well, they will try to trick you into staying, and if you do, I will die. If you stay, I'll give you a ring, a magic ring, and if you look at the ring, and she puts you have to keep the ring on, and if it's cloudy, if it starts to cloud over, that means I'm getting sick and you have to come back so that I'll revive. She says, I can do that. And she goes, and there's a wedding, and her elder sister's not that thrilled about who she's marrying a carpenter, and it wasn't. She thought she could do better, but she's getting older and all that stuff. So, and then she stays a bit, and then the sisters want to look at the ring, and they try it on, and then they steal it, and she can't find it, and eventually she gets it back from them, or she finds where they hid it, and then she goes back, and the beast was beginning to get a bit sick, but it was okay. And then a few weeks later, the trees are turning up again, and the other sister's getting married, and she goes back, and this time the sisters steal the ring again, and this time they keep it for longer until the father has to yell at them to give it back to her, and then she goes back, and the beast is really getting kind of sick and doesn't turn up for the evening meal, and she really misses him. And he doesn't. This beast coming in and asking her every night to marry him. She's starting to miss that. and so then he turns up and says, "Well, I was getting very sick. Just if you hadn't come, I would have died pretty soon." She said, "I'm so sorry." And anyway, and then the leaves turn down. What's happening? Your father is dying. And he says, She says, "I must go." And so he agrees against his better judgment, and she goes, and her father just perks up with her company and revives and isn't dying. But she put her ring down she took her ring off and put it just to wash her hands, and she forgot it. And then she can't find it, and then her sisters hid it again. And eventually it takes her days to find it. And then when she looks at it, it's all clouded over except for one little spot of light. And she says, "Oh, I must go back." And she goes, "I must. God, it's terrible. I must go back. The beast needs me." And so she goes, as soon as she has the attention to go back, she's almost there. So she goes back, and the palace is dark, and it looks like no one has lived in it. It's ruined. It looks in a ruin. Nobody's lived in it for 100 years. Autumn, bare ruined choirs, like that. And so she looks everywhere and she can't find him. He's not anywhere in the palace. And she walks outside, calling and then she finds his figure slumped under the big rose bush. And she goes to him, and indeed, it's the beast. And she kneels beside him, and she can just feel a little breath in him. And her tears fall on his cheek, and she kisses his cheek and said, "Beast, if you come back to life, I will marry you." And then the whole palace lights up and fireworks come and the rose bush bursts into bloom. And she turns around and looks, and there's this handsome, incredibly, astonishingly handsome young man, like a Greek god there. And she says, "But I want the monster." And he explains slowly to her doubting ears that actually he is the monster, and he was under a spell, and her love redeemed him, and now they can live together in the palace and so on. And she's still rather dubious, but eventually she says, "Oh, okay then." And they arrange for a wedding, and they bring the father. The father and the sisters come, but the sisters, they really don't like, they really can't stand Belinda. Like, she's so annoying, and they feel so much envy and spite towards her. So they just turn into pillars of marble by the gateway, But then the beast and Belinda, or the prince and Belinda, the monster and Belinda, they get married. As far as we know, they're still they built their palace somewhere up near Mendocino, but it's very hard to find in the sea fogs and so on. So here we are, thinking about them and telling the tale. So you can see it's a play. Tess said it's got many points of entry to it, the story. I thought it was a simple fairy tale, and the first time I ever told it in a retreat, it actually really didn't work. And I don't know why. It may have been that I didn't have confidence in it, or I don't know. But, we got people to say, "Well, where are you in the story?" So you could do that. Where are you in the story? What part of the story grabs you, touches you, There are different people in different places, of course. And if you enter the story, you'll find something different about both yourself and the story. And, are you, when the catastrophe happens and the ships get wrecked, are you one of the sisters who just has this person you just can't stand and is just really annoying and seems to succeed all the time in spite of her vapid qualities? And are you like that? Or are you Belinda, who's in a way trying to get by without really entering life, just by being smiling and all that sort of stuff. There are a couple of people who talked about, trying to get away from that like high school role of sort of cheerleader kind of consciousness where you're smiling and charming everybody, but you can't find who you are. And also sometimes you're full of rage because of that, so all that kind of thing. And also the rather charming thing, which I never saw in another version of the story except the one Calvino collected, is the monster changes into this handsome young prince, and she says, "But I want the monster," which is incredibly wonderful. And it's sort of true, you can feel the truth of that, and by the time, he's not a monster anymore, by the time we've really connected with each other. So, and when I did it this first time when it didn't really work, somebody, she said she was Belinda, and I said, "Well, what's it like being Belinda?" And she said, "She's such a princess, I can't stand her. Like, she's so entitled," and she went on for 5 minutes like this, and perfectly illustrating the problem of princesses. and then another guy who's an incredibly intelligent professor and very learned person, I knew to some degree, and he said, I can't do this. I'm a man of reason, and this is just fairy tales, and this is just unreasonable nonsense. And he was walking up and down, swinging his arms and talking like this. So I thought, wow, there's a lot of power in this story. And we're frightened of the monster, and we're frightened of the monster in us. Yeah. And but what do we do with the monster, the shadow material? So that would be the question. What do we do with the shadow material? And that funny thing where I was very struck, but the place I was in the story was when she said, "But I want the monster." You know, I felt incredibly touched because anybody who's ever felt like a monster, which is many of us, so certainly I have, and it's incredibly touched. Well, I can be lovable anyway. so, and then about 6 or 7 people were in that position in the story. It was really, and when you parse it down, everybody's in a slightly different place. And then somebody was one of the sisters because pointing a completely different attitude. When you went into her, they just want safety and they don't want this sort of level of risk and chaos that's happening, things like that. So. It's wonderful, wonderful. I think I might take some comments or questions from some people. Tess, do you have anything you want to say? Because you were there and you said a great thing about taking off the ring and things like that.
Well, the first thing that occurs to me was as we were telling the story, how increasingly annoyed people got with Belinda. That seemed promising. Because at first she seems, selfless and reasonable and, kind and all these things. And as we worked our way around the story, people were like, oh, for God's sake, just say you want something for yourself, And so in that way, it sort of even challenged sometimes, I think, what gets held as the spiritual attitude, because you can tell as I was listening to you this time, I was noticing how that plucking of the rose sort of unfolds this inextricable tie between Belinda and the beast. Like from that point forward, there's no going back. There's no, and that as soon as she becomes aware of his existence, they're bound. And I was thinking about that for in general, but also when we told the story that way. It's like when you become aware of your part in the story, and I'm sure you all, it'd be fun if we had like 12 hours, we'd go around and make you tell us what part spoke to you and what that is in your life. Once you become aware of that part, even if if it's so ugly, you'd rather you're not be bound to this part, or maybe you see it in someone else and you would rather cut ties with them and get away from it. As soon as you're aware of it, there's no going back. And that the more you try to be in some way not aware of it, the more dangerous it becomes to you. My part in the story was when she's made it so far, but she gets a little bit comfortable at home again and she decides to take off the ring and to do the dishes. And I was noticing how it was only by really embodying that moment in the story, literally sort of feeling what that might take off, that I discovered what it was really about for me, or what it felt like it was about, which was this kind of, I said prior to this story, my name for my dissertation is The Beast. And I kind of realized, oh, that's a funny little rhyme. And the act of just taking something off for a little while, shirking what is this enormous responsibility sometimes, just had this like, oh, delicious kind of relief. And I could really just feel that and think, oh yeah, but I can't, I love this beast somehow, even though I don't want to, and I can't abandon it or it starts to be bad for me. And I think we noticed, I guess the last thing to say is, I guess we noticed going around, whenever we do one of these stories, it's like whatever part you are and whatever willingness you're able to enter that part, it starts to inform it for everyone else. We're dreaming this story together. We're doing it right now, even if you're not saying too much. Your part is coming to hold the story, the life of the beast, beginning of Belinda to claim her real life, the turning of stone of the sisters. You can just feel them be alive. So I don't know. It was fun.
Other thing is the surprising things. I just thought the Tessa's experience of, or your experience of like the relief taking up. Sometimes you just want to step out of the story. You don't want to carry even your place in the story, right? And so she could step out and be in another story. It's a completely other story. Vasilisa or something. She could step into some other story, and that sort of rather that she wasn't just innocent in that regard. And I think it points to the fact that in our difficulties and catastrophes, it's claiming. There's a line by Wu Man about how we're enlightened but don't know it. And he says, you hide the loot in your pocket and call yourself innocent. But she's calling herself innocent, but in a way she's in the plot, getting thicker. Thanks, Tess. Allison, do you have anything to say?
Well, Tess was describing how I was much later in the story than she, when she took off the ring, and how as each person, particularly if they fully entered and embodied their place in the story, that it actually changed my place in the story, because the story changed. It was even the story itself was this living, moving animal that was in the room, always changing shape and changing place and changing my feelings toward it. That was absolutely fascinating, and very much like Cohen work in that way. The way it's my encounter with a Cohen is unfixed in that way. Also, I noticed this time how after the weekend, throughout the week, that it was still with me and still changing. And on Wednesday, I had this really singular experience where I was having oral surgery, and I went into the oral surgeon's office, and he had it set up so that there was a big screen in front of you, and often, like at my dentist, they have something to distract you, like they'll have pictures of sea turtles swimming, or they'll have, last time I went in, they had worldwide wrestling on, which seemed really kind of anomalous, but apparently there was an 8-year-old kid who came in before me and asked for that. But this time they had, on the screen, they had 2 large photographs, one of my teeth sort of stretched out, an x-ray, and the other was my skull slightly at an angle. And it was there for the entire surgery. And I looked at the skull, and the strangest thing happened. It was as if time had become unhinged. And suddenly I was looking at myself after I had died. I was myself, but I was looking back through time to when I had died, and I was looking at my skull, and it was clear, actually it was clearly, strangely recognizable as my face. And I don't know, there was something about the fear of the dissolution of, skulls can be like, if you think of a frightening image, you'll see that often in spiritual imagery and practices, where they'll have the skull as a sort of a beast, as this monstrous, frightening. The most frightening image is of a skull, and to see a skull that was visibly your own and it was so marvelous. It was like suddenly I was it somehow undid the fear of dying in the strangest way. Not that I was afraid of dying beforehand so much, but I don't know, it was the Beauty and the Beast story still moving through time, and the images still alive and affecting me. which I think is true of koan work as well, where the images are, the meaning and the encounter is always fresh and always a living encounter.
The great thing about the beast we have with us always, that's and the Buddha's that's the Buddha messenger of, the sick person, the old person, the corpse, the sacred messengers. Yeah. Christina, do you have anything you want to say?
So yeah, my part in the story was the moment, I picked a moment in between Belinda and the father when, so I wanted to sit in that in-between space between their relationships where he had done stuff for the sisters, but he'd forgotten to bring the rose to her, and yet she's his beloved daughter. And then she's been let down by him, but she's still going to be supportive of him and say, oh, it's fine that he forgot. And there was something so painful to me about the way they were missing each other in that moment. It was, I was telling somebody earlier this week about it and was thinking of that Cat Stevens song where the father and the son are singing to each other, and they both have a strong feeling of where things need to go, and they're not meeting together. And I find it I can almost not listen to that song. I find it so painful. And so I wanted to sit in that moment. And like Allison was saying, it's really stayed with me. It's just been opening up over and over again all week, kind of. And it's opening something up a lot in me. But I have to say that the retreat in general, I came home from the retreat and I really felt like I was describing it to my husband, and he said, I hadn't said what I felt about it yet. I was just describing certain moments of encounters during the retreat. And he said, oh my God, it feels like you've just come back from the underworld. And I'm like, there you go. That's exactly what it feels like. So it's very powerful.
Yeah, I think we're always exposed to those images, with, songs and hip hop songs and any songs and movies and I have a friend who loves watching Chainsaw Massacre movies and things like that. But it's a way of incorporating shadow in some way. I don't know. He's somebody I've never gone to a movie with. but there's a kind of thing about, can we let ourselves, feel all that we are, and see that you can tell that Belinda, she seems so delightful, and the more you get into it, she's in it up to her neck. She's very complicit, and she's and the father seems such a nice father, but he forgets Belinda's flower, and so you can tell that everybody's got their own, but also the devices, and this is a very Zen point, the flaws, the problems move the plot ahead. And you can't, without them, nobody gets enlightened, you don't get the wedding at the end, things like that. So I kind of like that. Amanda, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I guess just when Christina was just talking about coming back home and your husband saying it sounds like you went through the underworld, that's sort of the experience that I had and have been having, and just noticing my moment in the story was the very end, almost at the very end, when the sisters just are so envious and spiteful and they turn to stone. That just seemed so striking and disturbing to me, and also kind of like weirdly satisfying. And it was kind of awful to inhabit that. And I just noticed how, like, when I'm not really, I don't know, I think during my life I've had this kind of tendency to romanticize the phrase shadow work and think, oh, I'm going to go do a bunch of shadow work. And then I get into a situation like this and it's just so awful. A container where we can do this together, and the shadow stuff starts to rise, and it really did for me during that weekend retreat. And it's like nothing like I have thought it would be when I'm just yeah, it's just like the stuff that I don't want to look at. And I keep noticing that retreat after retreat and during sessions as well. It's like everything goes exactly the way I didn't want it to go. But it feels like just keep putting one foot in front of the other and trusting the process. And I guess this is how I trust the process, is just to keep going. But it feels completely dreadful. But when I can like open to that and let myself inhabit that, and okay, this is the part in the story that stuck out to me, was the sisters turning to stone. That's in the story too. Like, that's not out of the story, that's in the story as well. And I don't know, just letting that in, and yikes, it's pretty real.
Very good. All the ways we can stand outside of life and turn to stone, that I liked being that. I was tremendously touched by but I want the monster, and so I felt that was I think there's a big thing in Zen where we do this. Zen's a tough kind of thing, and well, at least I thought it was. That's why I joined, and maybe it's not, but at least like you confront things, and so I kind of and you confront the way we split ourselves and put the bad stuff over there and here, and there's a lot of meditation traditions are. There's me operating on the world, trying to get me into a better place. But a lot of people have pointed out in Zen and the Vajrayana tradition that there's just too much me and all that, and gradually it becomes less painful if we don't drag that around so much, But it's and then to one of the things I notice in Zen, and sort of, I've mentioned this more than once, but I really liked the idea that she loved the monster. The monster in me wants to be loved, and feels incredibly thrilled about that. So I found the retreat kind of thrilling in that way, and that there are these archetypal forces that are healing, that are in us, and that we don't have to be a different person. We spend a lot of time trying to be someone we're not, all that sort of thing. And we always do a terrible job. In my experience, one does a terrible job of that, and it's a strain. But Belinda's trying to be someone she's not too. She's trying to have just be all goodness and sweetness, but she's not that way either. So it's kind of nice. Peter Bullen, do you feel like saying anything? You were there, I remember. And
yeah, well, in the story itself, I took the part of the sisters. I think based on, in terms of, I aspirationally, it's kind of embarrassing, but I aspirationally want to give off a very Belinda-like imprint in the world, and even internally, through being involved in a long history of various spiritual settings. But it's a split, because I'm very interested, or have been very interested, or thought I would be consoled and comforted by external gifts around comfort and safety, and I felt like standing up for the sisters because they were, in a very raw way, honest about that. But another thing, just to say, and this came up just from listening to everyone this morning, and I won't go into the details of this because it's a little bit too elaborate. But without going into the details of the dream itself, let me just say the overarching thing that happened in the dream was that a very bad man succeeded. And I was running up and down the stairs trying to prevent this with, I don't know quite how, and then at the very end, seeing that the very bad man would succeed, I let out a blood-curdling scream that woke up all the adults in the apartment. And this didn't occur to me that this might be a residue of the beast story until this morning. But so that's my report. And just to say, I do not let out blood-curdling screams in dreams frequently, you know.
Thank you, Peter. That's so great. I think there is, you know, this story is not really a Puritan thing about renouncing and so on, you know, which a lot of people take spirituality that way, and Belinda does at first, until the time when she matures spiritually is when she says, "I want the beast." You know, I think, you know, before that she's been pretty hopeless, and so I think that's, and sometimes, you know, like I notice. Sometimes somebody wants something, and you know, they've been poor all their life or whatever it is, and insecure, and it's all right to just give it to them. I don't think, is it moral? Is it good? Is it, you know, shouldn't they be starving more and undergoing hard practice? And so we had a joke about Peter. We should, if anybody's got a lot of money out there and lying around, just give Peter a Maserati. So it's like there's a certain kind of, or just sometimes for some people, just a warm bed and you know, there's a whole homeless thing about making people sober up before you'll give them a shelter or something, but they could die out there, particularly in the cold in northern places, you know, and things like that. And so, just give them shelter and see if you can work on whether they sober up or not, you know, keep them alive. Give part of the Bodhisattva path is to give people the gift of life and share the gift of life together. And appreciate different people have different insecurities, you know, and it's sort of a thing, you know. Belinda, the envious sisters. What is the monster? I think we can see, you know, there's a kind of clarity. It's really important and necessary. That's a waking up, awakening, where we no longer think it's all about, you know, moving reality around to make ourselves comfortable or dazzling or safe or whatever our thing is. We don't have to think that. Worrying. And then, but it's also about not trying to stop doing that, because that's its own kind of worry. And, you know, don't raise delusive thoughts. If delusive thoughts are here, don't get rid of them. It's like, which I always thought is incredibly amusing. Because chances are they'll be here. But chances are you don't have to, you can be free, even with the delusive thoughts. There you go. What is the monster anyway? We're carried along by a great current. We're embraced. The universe holds us perfectly and has never let us drop. You look at your hand, you can see it's part of everything. That's the comment. What is this? How is my hand like the Buddha's hand? How is it so? How is my hand like the stars? So letting it come to us and not thinking there's something lacking that we have to scramble for, because then what we have is scrambling. And so then if we were that, then there's nothing lacking in scrambling around and reaching. And then we go, oh, I've got to get rid of the reaching though, and so then I've got to get rid of the reaching, then we can be at peace in that. So whatever's here is a vast freedom, actually. At some stage we stop having to, perfect it, attain it. It's already here. Even though to us it might look ugly. Right at this very moment, right now, at this moment, in this body, it's hard to find something that's wrong. even if you're the monster, even if you have to have dinner with a monster tonight, here we are. Each moment is complete and free. All you have to do is give up trying to live in a different moment, which you're incredibly persistent at trying to live in different moments. But, you know, what is it to be here? What is it to be you? Each moment contains the whole world, each thought form, each feeling. Pretty cool if you notice it. It's all right. It's all right to be here together, you know. Whatever your part in the story, it's all right. It's all right. In fact, it's perfect. It's nice to be happy when you can get it. Nice work if you can get it. Without clinging to it, but it just arrives, you know. Mark Gabriel, do you want to say anything? If I just spring on you like this, it's fine to say no.
Sure. There's a lot going on in this meditation today, bringing back the stuff from the retreat. And well, the night I left the retreat, I had this strange dream when I got home, and I had that I was in a basement and I realized there was a dead body. And I went to see who it was, and it was a naked dead body of Penelope Cruz, who is kind of an actress who I think is beautiful and exotic and kind of an anima image. And I was like fascinated. Here I was with this, but she was dead. She was beautiful, but just dead. And then later in the dream, I thought I was upstairs with people. Nobody knew about her in the basement. And I started to think there was maybe some smell. And I went back, and it was like, I need to bury this body, but I want to look into the mystery of the vagina. So I got a flashlight out, and I felt like this would give me be this endless tunnel to the cosmos, to the secrets of the universe. And when I looked into her vagina with the flashlight, it was a plastic charging port for an electric car, which I have an electric car. And that was really shocking. So anyway, that was a cool dream that I'm still working with.
Yeah, kind of a frightening dream, I think, you know, that what in yourself is you're letting be dead, you know, really question, you know, and trying to substitute electricity for or something, you know. So I don't know, I would work with that dream rather than saying it's a cool dream. I see what I mean. Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Nicola, do you have anything to say from Edinburgh, I think?
Yeah, I wasn't at the weekend because I was in Edinburgh. I would have loved to have been there. But it's been very rich just hearing about it and meditating today. It's kind of illuminated a lot of things for me. I feel quite Belinda-ish, even I've been noticing how irritating Belinda is recently which is something that's only happened. No, I don't know that aspect. But I had a very dominant stepfather who was a kind of monster inside out, because he was incredibly good looking and charming and talented and successful. But I just was realizing in the relationship how a lot of it was monstrous for me. So that's been really interesting looking at that. That's it.
Thank you very much. You know, we have these things. The dreams are helpful, like you find a body in your dream or something like that. And what needs to come to life, and what's, things like that. So the dreams are, and sometimes they're just wildly wonderful and interesting. I had a dream where I woke up in deep sleep, and I was having a bit of a hard time, and I've got a lot happening, coming at me, and good things, like tasks and stuff like that, writing tasks, things like that. But I dreamed there was a car thief, gang of car thieves who were camels, a gang of car, and it didn't sound too plausible, but they were just stealing cars and riding around in them, and I realized in the dream I kind of liked this. It seemed like fun, and then I was on a train, and two of the camels just came on, and they were pretending to be human beings, and one of them had they're both girl camels, and they had a hairdo up, like, really fun, kind of slightly wild hairdo. And the other one was hiding in plain sight and had a t-shirt with the word camel written on it. And I found the dream delightful. And I think, camels are, in Australia, they're wild creatures, actually, who are still occasionally used as, camel trains and things out in the desert, but they endure, they survive, they get through things, and so I took the dream as a comment on some of the things I have to get through, and so I enjoyed the camel, and car thievery is sort of, I don't know, the Zen masters are often thought of as thieves, It's our job to steal whatever it is you get about it. That's my job to steal. So I was glad to have the help of the camels. Yeah. So I think what we should do, I would also like, I think I'd like to read you a poem or two that this also came out of the field of the retreat, but it's been a certain sort of summer is ending, and so our marvelous time with summer fruits and tomatoes and summer weather, and you feel the mist is coming in and around Sonoma County, and I'm sure the grape people are a little concerned because there's so much fog and the grapes aren't ripening and things like that. But the tomato, you eat caprese while it's still here and things like that. So this is Pablo Neruda, Ode to the Tomato. This is Stephen Mitchell's translation. The street filled with tomatoes, midday, summer, the light splits in two halves of tomato, the juice runs through the streets. In summer, the tomato cuts loose, invades the kitchens, takes over lunches, sits down comfortably on sideboards among the glasses, the butter dishes, the blue salt shakers. It has its own light, a benign majesty. Unfortunately, we have to assassinate it. The knife plunges into its living flesh. It is a red viscera, a cool, deep, inexhaustible sun, fills the salads of Chile, is cheerfully married to the clear onion, and to celebrate, oil lets itself fall, sun and essence of the olive tree, onto the half-open hemispheres. Pepper adds its fragrance, salt its magnetism. It is the day's wedding. Parsley raises little flags. Potatoes vigorously boil. With its aroma, the steak pounds on the door. It's time, let's go. So, summer. So, yeah. I think. I think I want to read one more poem. This is a kind of remarkable poem. This is about it's like the camels. I think it's like about surviving. This is Anne Carson's poem called "The Wolf God." Like a painting, we will be erased. No one can remain. I saw my life as a wolf loping along the road, and I questioned the women of that place. Some regard the wolf as immortal, they said. Now, you know this only happened in one case, and that wolves die very regularly of various causes. You know this only happened in one case, and that wolves die regularly of various causes. Bears kill them, tigers hunt them. They get epilepsy, they get a salmon bone crosswise in their throat. They run themselves to death, no one knows why. But perhaps you never heard of their ear trouble. Their very good ears can hear a cloud pass overhead, and sometimes it happens that a wind-blown seed will bury itself in the oral canal, displacing equilibrium. They go mad trying to stand upright. Nothing to link with. Die of anger. Only one we know learned to go along with it. A windblown seed will bury itself in the oral... I'm just getting the plot right here. A windblown seed will bury itself in the oral canal, displacing equilibrium. They go mad trying to stand upright. Nothing to link with. Die of anger. Only one we know learned to go along with it. He took small steps at first, using the updrafts. They called him Whiskol. That means looks good in spring. Things are as hard as you make them. So, there you are. Kind of Zen saying. Okay, I'm going to thank you for coming. It's a nice thing to sit together.